Every single day, we're trusting the cloud with our photos, our documents, pretty much our entire digital lives. But behind that smooth, easy experience, there's a constant, invisible battle going on to keep all that data safe. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on cloud security and show you who's really in that fight, protecting your data.
It seems like a pretty simple question, right? But the answer? Well, it's way more complex than you might think. It's not just one company or a single piece of software. Nope. It's a massive, coordinated effort with a whole ecosystem of players. And today, we're going to break down exactly who they are and what they do.
So who are these guardians of our data? To figure that out, we've got to remember that the cloud isn't just one thing. It's a really complex ecosystem, more like a team, with a bunch of different players all working together to keep our information safe and sound.
All right, so this is basically the official blueprint from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST for short. It breaks down that entire cloud ecosystem into 5 fundamental roles that absolutely have to work together to deliver any cloud service securely.
So who are these 5 key players? First up, we've got the cloud consumer. And hey, that's you. It's us, the people actually using this stuff. Then you've got the provider, the company that runs the service, and the carrier, which is providing the internet pipes. And finally, there's the auditor, who's kind of like a referee, checking for security and compliance, and the broker, who can act as a go-between for providers and consumers. And yeah, as you can probably tell from this diagram, this is not a simple A to B process. It's this complex, tangled web of interactions. Data and responsibility are constantly getting passed between these different players, and every single one of those handoffs is a potential weak spot. That's what makes securing the cloud such a huge challenge.
Okay, let's zoom in on something we all use every day, software as a service, or SaaS. We're talking about apps like Office 365 or Google Docs. They're amazing, right? So convenient, letting us get to our files from anywhere. But here's the catch. All that convenience comes with some hidden risks. The easier it is for us to access our data, the more vulnerable it can be.
And that convenience, it throws the door wide open for a whole bunch of security headaches. We're talking about everything from making sure only the right people can get to your files, to stopping massive data breaches, to just making sure the service is actually working when you need it. These are the critical challenges the cloud security pros are working on, like all the time.
So, how in the world do security experts stay one step ahead of the bad guys? How do they find those weak spots in the system before they get exploited? Well, they use powerful automated tools, and we're about to look at one of the big ones, a framework called Vulkan.
Now, before we get into how Vulkan works, let's just quickly define what a vulnerability assessment even is. Think about it like this. It's basically a home inspection for your digital house. An inspector comes in, pokes around, and systematically checks for any weaknesses, a leaky pipe, some bad wiring, a crack in the foundation. Then they give you a report that tells you how serious each problem is and which ones you need to fix first. That's exactly what a vulnerability assessment does for cloud services.
So Vulkan pretty much automates that whole inspection. You just feed it your system setup and then ask it a simple question in plain English, something like, are there any weak spots that could let someone steal my data? Vulkan then scans a massive database of known vulnerabilities and spits out a detailed report showing you exactly where you're exposed.
But, just finding a vulnerability, that's only half the battle. The next step, and honestly, this is the most important part, is figuring out the actual risk it poses. A tiny crack in the wall is a problem, sure, but a giant hole is a catastrophe. That's where risk management comes in. It helps us prioritize which fires to put out first.
In this quote right here, it just sums it up perfectly. It's a 3-step dance. Find the risk, figure out how bad it could be, and then take action to bring that danger down to a level you can live with.
And that idea leads us to another incredible tool called Nemesis. On the left, you see this super complex, kind of abstract threat model that it uses to analyze a system. And on the right, that's what Nemesis does. It takes all that brainy, complicated stuff and turns it into a simple, actionable web tool. It doesn't just tell you there's a problem, it actually estimates the risk and even suggests ways you can fix it.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about these frameworks and tools in theory, but what does this look like in the real world? Let's get practical and put them to the test with a case study on one of the most popular SaaS products on the entire planet, Microsoft Office 365.
And these are the exact kinds of high-stakes vulnerabilities that tools like Vulkan and Nemesis are built to sniff out. Now, you'll see they each have a CVE number. That just stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. It's a standard way to track these things. But look at what they do. They all allow for remote code execution. Now that sounds technical, but what it really means is a hacker could literally take over your computer just by getting you to visit a bad website or open a dodgy-looking file. That's how serious this stuff gets. And check this out. This chart gives us a really fascinating breakdown of the most common threats facing a big platform like Office 365. The biggest chunk at 38% is information disclosure, basically data leaks. But right on its heels is something called elevation of privilege. That's when a hacker gets in and manages to get way more power and control over the system than they should have. This kind of data is gold for security teams because it tells them exactly where they need to focus their defenses.
Okay, so with all these threats floating around, what's the solution? How do we actually keep our data safe? Well, the answer is a simple but really powerful idea. Security is a partnership. It's not just one person's job. It's a shared responsibility. It's a team sport.
This slide really breaks down what that shared responsibility looks like. On one side, the cloud provider handles the big picture stuff, like physically securing the data centers and making sure one customer's data is totally isolated from another's. But on our side, as consumers, we have a critical role too. We're the ones responsible for using strong passwords, turning on two-factor authentication, and keeping our own computers and phones secure.
I love this quote from the source material. It just nails it. Security is a shared responsibility. The provider secures the product, and consumers apply solutions. Think of it this way. The provider builds a safe house, but it's on us to actually lock the doors and windows. One just doesn't work without the other.
So what's the big takeaway here? Look, the truth is, the fight for cloud security is a never-ending battle. Hackers are always going to be looking for new ways to get in. The only way to stay ahead is to be relentless about it. That means constantly checking for weaknesses, actively watching for threats, and building what's called a defense-in-depth strategy. That just means having layers of security, so if one layer fails, there's another one right behind it ready to stop an attack.
At the end of the day, even with these massive companies spending billions to secure the cloud, a huge piece of the security puzzle is still in your hands. It's a pretty powerful thought, and it leaves us with one last really important question to ask ourselves. Are you holding up your end of the bargain?